how secular polyphony became a tool for displaying wealth and status in the Renaissance. Imagine the scene. Florence, 1529. Duke Cosimo de' Medici wants to impress his foreign guests. He does not just show off his gold-plated silverware or his newly completed palace. Instead, he invites them into a lavishly decorated hall. A group of 6 singers, the finest voices money can buy across Europe, step forward. No instruments, just voices. They begin a madrigal, freshly composed by a Flemish master the Duke has lured to his court. One voice starts a melody, another picks it up a few seconds later, then a third, a fourth. They weave in and out, imitating, chasing, finally merging into breathtaking chords. The guests sit in stunned silence. The Duke smiles. "This is what I have. What do you have?" That scene captures one of the most significant non-musical functions of secular polyphony in the Renaissance. It became a class marker, a form of cultural capital, and a display of soft power. But how did the mere sound of a few voices in a room acquire such social weight? Why, polyphony was costly. For polyphony to become a display tool, it first had to be rare and expensive. And it was. Cost number 1, skilled human labor. Singing a 4-part madrigal or a 5-part chanson is a demanding skill. Each singer must read their own line while listening to the others, a skill that takes years of training in counterpoint and solfège. Nobles who wanted a private cappella singing group had to recruit the best talent from Flanders, Italy, and France. This was a competitive market. Top singers sometimes earned salaries higher than a minister's. Cost number 2, music printing and manuscripts. Every piece had to be copied by hand, or later, specially printed. Leather-bound madrigal books with gilded edges were luxury objects in themselves. The Duke of Ferrara kept his collection under lock and key, like jewels. Cost number 3, opportunity cost. Those singers, while performing for the Duke, were not working in a field or a workshop. Maintaining a permanent 6-voice ensemble cost roughly the same as keeping 6 thoroughbred horses. Any Duke who could afford that was demonstrating that he possessed enough wealth to support artists for the enrichment of courtly culture. The numbers game. How many voices? In the Renaissance, the number of parts in a polyphonic piece became a measure of a court's cultural investment. Early 15th century, 3 voices were enough, but soon the Dukes of Milan and Burgundy moved to 4, then 5. By the late 16th century, some courts were commissioning pieces for 8, even 12 voices. More voices meant more skilled singers, harder coordination, and a more striking effect. The most famous example, the Concerto delle Dame, Concert of Ladies, in Ferrara. Duke Alfonso II d'Este formed a group of female singers, which was rare and dazzling. These 3 or 4 ladies could perform the most complex madrigals by Gesualdo and Marenzio, so beautifully that listeners were deeply moved. Foreign ambassadors who heard them wrote back home, "In Ferrara, there is nothing more worth seeing than those singing ladies." Consider this. The Duke of Ferrara could have hired a mercenary army, built a palace, or staged a fireworks display. But many other courts could do the same. What distinguished Ferrara was access to an unparalleled performance of polyphonic art featuring elite singers. The composer as symbolic capital. The great Renaissance composers, Josquin des Prez, Orlando de Lassus, Palestrina, Monteverdi, were not starving artists. They were highly valued and well-compensated courtiers. Dukes and popes competed for them with impressive offers. But here is the subtle part: exclusive ownership of works. When a duke hired a composer, the composer's new works were first heard at that duke's court, and sometimes kept from publication for months or years, so the musical treasure remained theirs. Sending a newly composed motet or madrigal to another court as a gift was a political gesture. See this jewel? I have it. Do you? Music as the shared language of the European elite. Curiously, secular polyphony ignored national borders. An Italian duke might write a French chanson with French text. A Flemish composer might write an Italian madrigal. An English queen might hire Italian singers. This musical cosmopolitanism allowed nobles to communicate on a sophisticated level beyond borders. When someone mentioned madrigal or chanson, everyone knew that a certain standard of artistic refinement was implied. Polyphonic music became something like a code of conduct for an exclusive circle. Either you understand it, and thus you are educated and refined, or you do not, and you are not part of that circle. Historical records show that nobles sometimes used music to distinguish themselves from rivals. They would host private performances that only a select few were allowed to hear. Just as a wealthy individual today might arrange a private dinner with a famous musician, a Renaissance duke used access to the best polyphony to draw a clear line between himself and the bourgeoisie. Framing musical form as a reflection of social order. Beyond all that, the very form of polyphony, independent lines weaving into a harmonious whole, became a metaphor for the nobility's ideal social order. In a good polyphonic piece, each voice is independent, but ultimately contributes to a beautiful totality. That is exactly what nobles wanted their society to look like. Everyone in their proper place, but all working together for a glorious whole. A whole that, of course, bore the duke's name. The Renaissance writer Baldassare Castiglione, in the Book of the Courtier, explicitly makes this point. Good ensemble singing shows self-control and the ability to harmonize with others, the marks of a perfect courtier. Polyphonic music became a training ground for courtly social skills: listening, delayed entry, intelligent imitation, and timely withdrawal. Conclusion: Renaissance soft power. In the end, secular polyphony was never just beautiful art. It was a web of social meanings. It signified wealth because it was expensive, diplomacy because it could be given as a gift, education because it signaled refinement and literacy, and ideology because it mirrored the hierarchical order. Today, when we listen to Monteverdi's madrigals or Lassus's chansons, part of our pleasure still comes from the notes themselves. But it is worth remembering that behind every transparent chord and every elegant imitation sat a duke with dignity, telling his rival, "This I have, because I am able to." And perhaps that dynamic is not so far from our own world.